Okay, well, welcome everyone. It's straight up 7 o'clock, so we'll get started. My name is Melissa Delizer. I am the Communications Manager for Washington County Department of Land Use and Transportation. And I'm joined by Stacy Shetler, who is our County Engineer, and John Fasana, who is a Principal Engineer. And then we've got three other communications people who are running all kinds of things in the background. Chris Lewinberg is our Senior Communications Specialist in our Operations and Maintenance Division. Diane Overstreet, a Communications Specialist in the Director's Office. And Heather Sturgill, who is our Communications Specialist in our Planning and Development, or excuse me, sorry, wrong division, our Engineering and Construction Services District. Okay, so we appreciate you taking the time to meet with us tonight. We know this is a topic that you're very interested in, and we are pleased to present some information on our decision to remove the fire gate and to hear your questions and comments on the subject. We've heard concerns and support alike from many of you, and we hope that this meeting helps us to better understand one another's positions. Commissioner Treese asked me that to extend her apologies. She had an unexpected conflict with tonight's meeting. Her assistant, Megan McKibben, is participating in the meeting and will be reporting back to her. So we've got a couple of housekeeping things. We will be responding to questions submitted via email first. If you have additional questions, please submit the questions, raise your hand, and Chris Lewinberg will be calling on you. Staff will be monitoring to make sure that questions get answered if you put some in the chat, and we will do our best to avoid duplication of questions. We ask that you do the same if possible. If there are questions that we cannot answer tonight, we will answer them as quickly as possible, and we will send the answers out via email to all those who have registered for tonight's meeting. Please feel free to share those emails, however, with any of your neighbors who did not sign up for tonight's meeting. If you have comments or follow-up questions, please use your raise the hand feature as we discussed so that we can call on you. And we will also be using the chat feature to share website addresses and phone numbers and emails so you can obtain more information on a specific topic. Tonight's meeting is being recorded. We will share that recording, this presentation, and the information that we share in the chat on our Ridge Road and McDaniel Roads fire gates removal website. And about our website, starting Monday, Washington County is getting a new website. And we've been assured that all of our current web pages will transfer seamlessly to the new website. However, if you experience any issues, please email us using the LUT.com email address that we are posting in the chat. So we will get started. So I'm sure many of you are very familiar with the history of this fire gate. We've kept this slide brief intentionally so that we'd be sure to have plenty of time to answer your questions and to hear your comments. The fire gate, as you all know, was installed due to the site distance issue on the northwest corner. The county's goal was always to have Ridge Road with access to McDaniel once the site distance issue was corrected. The intersection's northwest corner did correct the site distance there, and we had many residents ask us to have the fire gate removed as we had planned. We did do the survey of residents in 2020, and they did support removal. And then a county engineering study has determined that site distance is sufficient to support removal. I'm going to let John Fasana take this slide, and he's the engineer. So John, do your thing.
Yeah, thanks, Melissa. Hopefully you can all hear me okay. Again, my name is John Fasana. I'm a principal traffic engineer with Washington County. So just kind of real quick, so this slide just go over. So the county investigated site distance at Ridge McDaniel. So really site distance requirements for the county, they're governed by a few different codes. We've got our community development code, section 501, 8.5F, which requires site distance for developments to be 10 times either the posted or the 85th percentile speed, whichever is greater. And so the site distance formula for this section of the community development code, it's pretty generic. And so where this is not met, we use the more specific national AASHTO code for site distance, which takes into account speeds as well as perception reaction time, deceleration rates, and grade. So I believe more detailed information on the AASHTO formula, it is available on the Ridge McDaniel Firegate, the webpage, and the link for that should be in the chat. But if you have trouble finding that, let us know. So real quick, just summary, looking at southbound traffic, the CDC requirement that I mentioned first is 350 feet for a 35-mile-an-hour road. And the measured sight distance on that approach was 385 feet. So sight distance on that approach is acceptable. Looking at the northbound traffic, the CDC requirement is 380 feet for the 85th percentile speed of 38 miles per hour. And on that approach is where our sight distance measurement at 15 feet back from the stop bar was 320 feet. So at 320 feet, when we apply the AASHTO code, based on that AASHTO code, that required sight distance for northbound traffic is 263 feet, which is less than that, the 320 measured at 15 feet back. And then we show a range in there that the 334 is also a measurement for the stop bar 10 feet back from the travel lane. So therefore, we met AASHTO sight distance. Sight distance is met at the intersection, and it should operate safely. And that was really the main requirement for removing the gate. Go ahead, Melissa, slide 4.
Okay, so we're getting into our community submitted questions. Guy Field submitted this one. Is the decision final? And if it is final, when will the gate be removed? The decision is final. As we mentioned, the gate was always intended to be temporary, and having additional access to McDaniel Road improves both emergency response and traffic circulation. We have the gate scheduled for removal on October 19th. That's subject to change depending on crew availability and weather and other things of that nature. We will notify all service providers. That includes emergency service providers, your law enforcement, medical personnel, garbage and recycling, TriMet, Beaverton School District, and we have a whole list that we traditionally do notify in situations like this. Mr. Maddox, sidewalk on the north side of Ridge Road is not continuous and is heavily used by children due to the bus stop located at the intersection. Are there plans to complete the sidewalks and when? So there are continuous sidewalks on the south side of Ridge Road, number one. However, the gaps in the sidewalks on the north side of McDaniel Road are mostly along undeveloped properties. And as development occurs in these locations, adding sidewalks along McDaniel adjacent to developing properties will be considered conditions of approval. So in other words, the developers will install and pay for any sidewalks on subdivision lots along McDaniel as they develop. We have no way of knowing, however, when that development may occur. But we also encourage you to submit a request for sidewalk improvements through the Urban Road Maintenance District Pedestrian and Biking Improvement Program. This is the only program in the county with regular funding for pedestrian and biking improvements. Most, but not all projects are small scale, meaning that they are usually under 500,000 and are most commonly sidewalks and bike ped crossings. So for more information on how to do that and to submit your request, you would need to visit our website, and we posted the link to the bike ped program in the chat. Again, from Mr. Maddox, what are your plans for enforcing speed limits along the sightlines of this intersection, given that it's within an enforced Sheriff's Patrol District, ESPD? Speeding and traffic enforcement is the responsibility of the Washington County Sheriff's Department, not Land Use and Transportation. However, we have had conversations with the Sheriff's Office, making them aware of the neighborhood's concerns. We do encourage you, though, to contact the Sheriff's Office directly for additional speed enforcement. The link for the online submissions and the non-emergency phone numbers are also in our chat. McDaniel Road, beginning at 111th, is a hotbed for sports car and motorcycle enthusiasts that plan to drive and are driving aggressively through the hills between here and Northwest Portland. I don't know about you guys, I live in the neighborhood, and yes, I can attest to hearing the street racing up in Forest Heights from our bedroom windows. What is the average speed per vehicle for that section of road? Stopping sight distance, Guidelines assume that a certain speed at the 85th percentile of maximum mandated by law, but my guess is that the 85th percentile for speed is greater than the legal 100th percentile. What data have you gathered on speed for that location over what period of time, and what was the sample size? And I am going to turn that one over to John as well.
Yeah, thanks, Melissa.
You're welcome.
So as far as the data, we collected 24-hour speed data on McDaniel, 2 full days. So once was October in 2020, and then again in February of 2022. So based on the data, both those, the majority of the traffic was traveling at or below 38 miles per hour in this zone. The zone's posted 35 through here. So specifically October 22nd, 2020, the sample size for northbound traffic looking to the south was 1,285 vehicles. And the 85th percentile measured was 38 miles an hour, and the average speed was 33 miles an hour. And then the count February 2nd, 2022, we had a sample size of 1,501 vehicles. And for that one, we had an 85th percentile of 38 miles per hour, and the average speed was 32 miles per hour. In addition to those, what we did, there was also a speed study conducted by a third party hired by the HOA in September of 2021. And that data was only collected for a 30-minute period between 2:30 and 3 p.m. So that the sample size for that count was only 52 vehicles. The 85th percentile speed they measured at 36 miles an hour, and the average speed they measured was at 33 miles an hour. So we didn't use that data for analysis because ours had obviously a much larger sample size and was also more conservative with the higher 85th percentile speed that was measured. You can go to the next slide, Melissa.
All right. So currently, no traffic controls or signs at the intersection of Ridge Road and McDaniel. In addition, the weeds in the McDaniel ditch have remained unmaintained and overgrown, obstructing the lines of sight looking south. Given that the intersection will serve as a school bus stop and has a high level of pedestrian traffic, what safety measures is the county planning once the gate is removed? Will there be crosswalks, traffic signs, or any other installations to prevent an accident? And this one is Stacy Shetler.
Yeah, thank you, Melissa. So after the gate is removed, there'll be a stop sign installed on Ridge Road. And then there will also be an intersection warning sign added on McDaniel ahead of the Ridge Road intersection. There'll be a rider on the bottom of the sign. There's a little pictogram of the sign just to the right of the slide words there. There'll be Ridge Road at the bottom of it, and then we'll add a couple of red flags to the top to draw attention to the change that's going on at that intersection. We are not adding a marked crosswalk at the location. It'll just be a standard two-way stop control. And as far as the vegetation goes, the county is going to trim the vegetation. I verified that today before the gate comes out. And if there are future issues with the vegetation, that will be the responsibility of the adjacent homeowners per the conditions of approval of that development. Those conditions continue to apply to the homeowners that live adjacent to McDaniel. So the site distance and weed control will be up to the homeowners there, both in the ditch and then on the properties themselves, if there are any trees or bushes that are obstructing site distance. Next slide.
Okay, speed is getting crazy on McDaniel. Many cars, motorcycles over 50 miles an hour. Once the barrier is removed, cars will be turning off of McDaniel onto Ridge Road, and many drivers are traveling way too fast to slow down for a turning car. They are also not prepared for a traffic change. So once the barrier is removed, has LUT considered putting speed bumps northbound between Dumar Lane and Ridge Road, as well as southbound between Applegate Way and Ridge Road? We will not be installing speed bumps or speed cushions on McDaniel Road. McDaniel is a collector. That's its road classification. And collectors are meant to move traffic from one location to another. Another way to think about it is as a commuter road. So it's designed to move traffic at consistent speeds. And there are some concerns with speed bumps. There are side effects that can actually cause more harm than good. And count data taken during our analysis of this intersection in October 2020 showed that the majority of the traffic was traveling on or about 38 miles per hour, as was the traffic in 2021, as was the traffic traveling when the HOA did their sample size also was at 38 and the average speed was 32. So the count location was not intended to find the highest speeds, but the majority of drivers did exhibit decent compliance. So the speed data collected suggests there are very few outliers near the Ridge Road intersection. There are adverse side effects to speed bumps. Studies have shown that drivers tend to accelerate after crossing a speed bump in order to make up for lost time. Another side effect, which may be annoying to adjacent homeowners and residents, is the noise resulting from acceleration and deceleration and vehicle noises, undercarriage, rattling parts, etc., when crossing the speed bump. A third side effect is frequent attempts by drivers to vary their speeds when they're approaching speed bumps to lessen their impact, and that potentially can increase their comfortable crossing speed. What can the county do about speeding on Ridge Road and other neighborhood streets once the gate is down? Enforcement is the most effective deterrent. So Ridge Road and other neighborhood streets, again, these are classified as urban locals. And so they may be eligible for traffic calming subject to the criteria in our neighborhood streets program. So I'm going to turn the rest of this over to Chris Lewinberg, who's our neighborhood streets program expert.
Thank you very much, Melissa. And now you can see there at the bottom of the slide that we will be collecting speed data after 6 months to help determine eligibility for this neighborhood streets program, which I'll be telling you more about in just a moment. So just like Stacy was telling us earlier, we'll be collecting traffic data over a period of 24 to 48 hours. And we will be using that data to establish a new benchmark for what we're expecting on that road that we can make future comparisons to. We will be doing this after 6 months because by that time, new traffic patterns should have been stabilized after the fire gate removal. What we're going to do then is we're going to compare that data to the thresholds that are required to qualify for the neighborhood streets program. And we will be sharing that data with you once it's collected and analyzed. We'll be using the email list that we collected for this meeting to distribute that data. If we could go to the next slide, Melissa. Thank you very much. So again, using that data, we're going to decide and determine if you are eligible for the neighborhood streets program. And if you are, we are going to need a little bit of engagement from you. This is a community-led program. So, the mechanism is we need to hear from you about if you want to engage in the neighborhood streets program. And if you and your neighborhood choose to, then you may be eligible for a safety campaign. Now, if you are eligible based on that data, our staff will work with you to determine what kinds of speed reduction measures might be possible on your roads. And then we'll rank those eligible options. And these options can range from various things. Again, as Melissa said, on Ridge Road, speed cushions may be eligible, curb extensions may be eligible, as well as speed feedback devices on Ridge. So these are things that our staff will discuss and work with you to decide what's best. So we'll generate a petition that needs to be sent throughout the neighborhood. 51% of your neighbors do need to sign that petition in order to move forward, and property owners can each only sign once. The next step is to collaborate with neighbors. We decide collectively on calming measures and draft a traffic calming plan that'll be voted on by the community. We then send those ballots out to each property in the area who fills that out and sends it back to us. If we get 67% approval rate or more, then we move forward. Now, again, if we move forward from there, we share the plan with the community and then we implement it. Once that plan's been carried out, we review the results of that project together to make sure that we have the intended result, which of course is safer roads.
So that concludes our formal presentation. At this time, we'd like to open it up for questions and comments from any of you who would like to speak. Please use the raise hand function and Chris will be monitoring that and we'll call on you. You can also put questions into the chat feature if you so choose.
All right, I see here that we have a few raised hands. And there we are, Mahmood. It looks like you're currently on mute.
There you go.
We can't hear you if you're speaking currently.
Do we want to move on to Kelly while we're waiting for?
Yeah,
Mahmood?
absolutely. Mahmood will come back to you in a moment and see if we can hear. Kelly, can you unmute?
Hi there.
Hi.
Hey, I wanted to ask a question. You guys seem to have some really great safety programs with the neighborhood program, as well as I'm really thinking through that we need a north sidewalk on Ridge. However, I guess my question to you is, why opt for the least safe option? Why are we not enacting those safety programs when that's the primary concern of the neighborhood, and then remove the gate? Why are we doing harm before we can be safe?
Punt that one to Stacy or John.
Yeah, sure. So the criteria for removing the gate was just making sure that sight distance was acceptable. And so that was the scope of this. The sidewalks on the north side, again, as Melissa described earlier, would be done either through a sidewalk program at Washington County, or more typically with the development or redevelopment of those parcels. There is a sidewalk on the south side that is continuous that can be used. And so there is a viable option for pedestrians to use on that road.
So may I have a follow-up question? It seems to me that the sight distance is actually split. If you're using the first criteria, one is acceptable and one is not. And we know McDaniel is a very curvy road. There's a lot of people talk about the speeding. I recognize that you guys did a traffic study, but one was in the fall and one was in the winter. Do you know if those were done on clear sunny days? That's my first question. But my second is, I really am still concerned that that's kind of a split decision for me. And I'm just consistently thinking of the children that play on that road. There's an open park space. It's not a park, but there's an open space very close to where people turn off that road. And I know even when we're driving, there are a lot of children on that road.
Stacy and John.
Yeah, I mean, so understand the first question is kind of more related to the traffic count data, right? And kind of the timing. So I believe we had in there, it was October and February-ish. And so, most of the time traffic counts we end up doing basically when school's in session, because that's kind of the more normalized trend, and traffic's a little heavier during those times as well. So to be honest, I don't know exactly what the weather was when those counts were taking, but we do have some station counts along McDaniel where we take counts basically every year, and it's pretty consistent every time we've looked at that, the speeds. So they don't vary drastically once you kind of get this large of a sample size over that amount of time.
All right,
And
thank you,
getting back-
Kelly. Oh,
Go ahead. Sorry, Melissa.
I was just going to say, getting back to one of your other questions about why we don't implement the safety programs before opening the gate, because we don't know the level of traffic that might be generated when the gate is removed. Until it's removed, we can't adequately create a safety program to match probable conditions. It's safer for the community for us to create those traffic calming programs once we know what the traffic level actually is. We could, there is a potential for us to, if we don't know what the traffic is for sure, there's a potential for us to actually create a program that wouldn't actually meet the needs. And that wouldn't be a safe thing either. So we do have to have the actual conditions in place before we can do a traffic calming study and remediation.
All right, thank you, Melissa, and thank you, Kelly, for your question. Let's move along to Mahmoud. We're going to give you another try here. So I'm going to unmute you again, and you're ready to unmute if you're able. All right, we're still not hearing you here, so I'm going to move along again. I apologize for the inconvenience. Gary, do you have a question? You may unmute if you'd like to ask your question, Gary.
How about now? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I've been a resident in Ironwood for over 30 years. And I know that property, Iron Ridge Estates, was developed with the intent of opening that road because the site distancing was obstructed to the north. There were 3 properties on Ridge. The one sold and they developed 3 houses. There's 2 half-acre lots with 2 homes there. And just north of Ridge, there was a development, I think it's named Carlisle, was developed with 14 lots. And everyone that goes to those 14 lots has to come through vintage development to get to their home. Now, when that road is expanded 100 feet over to Ridge, that's going to push more traffic through Ironwood, down Blackhawk, down 112. And the question is that this should have been, I think, and why was this not removed years ago? Because that was the plan. Ridge Road stopped at the Steinfeld Pickle House, and it was a dirt road that went down to those 3 houses. Peter Noyes developed this with the condition of doing a full street improvement versus a half street improvement with curbs on the north side, and he hooked up those 3 homes to sewer. But just a matter of a short time, in our opinion, that the development to the north is going to come be flood all those homes, including Iron Ridge Estates, going to be flushed, continuing to go back down 112th and Blackhawk. And I guess I'm not formulating the question other than why was this not done sooner? Why did it take the homeowners to initiate this drive to get the darn road open? Because you can see the road, the curbs, the sidewalks, the street. To open that up is all you have to do is remove the gate. No infrastructure, nothing needs to be done to open that up to McDaniel. So I guess my only question would be is, why did we have to wait so long to do this?
I can answer that one. So I think that the issue was, so we got some bad information when that property the property on the northwest corner was developed. And so that property was conditioned to remove that gate, but they came back with a site distance measurement of 170 feet measured to the south. And so at that time, the planner on the job said, well, we don't have site distance to the south. So what we'll do is we'll leave the gate in place. And then at such time as the county engineer, which is myself, can make the determination that it's acceptable to open, then that will happen. And so it just kind of stayed there in that status until someone from Ironwood neighborhood brought it to our attention. And that's when we started looking at it.
Okay, all right. Well, those 4 homes in the corner when that house was sold and that huge laurel hedge was cut down, that was done many years ago. I mean, it's been a long time. And as far as who's addressing about safety for the kids, streets are not a playground. Send your kids to a park. Don't have them play in the street. That's a real lame argument for anything. Oh, my kids play in the street.
Okay, Gary, thank you very much for sharing. And it sounds like Mahmoud's microphone is not working, but he did post his question in the chat, so we'll go to that next. He asks, well, first he says he's gonna thank us and then ask why there will be no sidewalk and no supporting traffic light or sidewalk traffic light. Stacy or John?
So I'm
Yeah,
going to try and
go ahead,
interpret that.
Stacy.
Maybe John, you want to take that?
Well, I know we had kind of discussed a few times with that there, there is a lack of sidewalk on the north side. I think, part of that is there's properties in there that have been undeveloped, and normally in this kind of area, really the times that sidewalk gets installed in the county is through development, or the only other mechanism we have to fund kind of the sidewalk programs is through the minor betterment program. And I think we had touched on that before and included a link in there on that. And then as far as the traffic signal question, really there's a number of steps that need to kind of be met to put in a traffic signal. And the biggest one is there's a series of warrants that kind of based on vehicular volumes and speeds. And the short answer is really there's not enough traffic. The Ridge McDaniel doesn't meet the traffic signal warrants, and so that's not really the right control for this type of intersection.
Thank you, John. Here we are. Vina, you can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hello.
Hi, Vina, we
Hello.
can hear you.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great.
Hey, hi. Thank you for the great presentation. So we like the plan, but however, there were concerns, and I would like to echo what Kelly had mentioned earlier. I agree. This is not the playground to play near to the Ironwood fire grade. Near there is a ground, but still there are a lot of kids play around this neighborhood. So there is no sidewalk or any safety protocol is being taken, but before that the road is open. So there are some concerns, right? But as you said, you collected the data, that is great, but not during sunny days, during summer. So what there is no speed bump is also considered. So what level of safety our neighborhood is gonna go through? So I'm more concerned about the kids' safety. I know we are not supposed to play, but still those are the regular, at least they should bike or whatever it is, right? So what kind of a safety protocol that we need to follow once the gate is open? And moreover, now the fall season is going to start, rain and etc., right? So that was my main concern as a safety.
Yeah, I can understand your safety concerns. The neighborhood has had the advantage of having that road closed with that gate. And so there are activities that have been occurring on the road that probably won't be appropriate to continue. I think the bigger picture of why that road is supposed to connect is one of traffic circulation for the whole neighborhood. And so right now, all the traffic has to use Black Hawk Drive. And so all that traffic affects a limited number of people. And then there's only one entrance, essentially one main entrance in and out of that neighborhood. And so this connection, as planned and as intended, helps to distribute that traffic to improve the neighborhood circulation, as well as improve emergency services access to the neighborhood. And so that's the big picture why the street was constructed in the first place and why the gate's being opened right now.
Thank you, Vina. And let's go now to Kelly S. Kelly, you may unmute yourself to ask your question.
Yes, thank you. I'm sorry. I just wanted to respond because I think that my comment was perhaps misinterpreted. Because I did talk about the children in the playground. I believe if there was a sidewalk, you wouldn't have children in the street. I don't actually have children of my own, but I live in a neighborhood that has a lot of children, and so we're very careful. And that's my concern, is not having the safety features before opening the gate. And I do want to point out, I'm the original owner of my home on Ironwood Lane, and I never knew they were removing that gate. When we purchased the home, it was not something that was pointed out to the homeowners. And it seemed to me to be a very safe space, not just for children, but to, I think if you open that up, there's also potential that we'd get a lot more crime. So, and I'll close with that. I guess it's not really a question, but I was concerned that perhaps my comment had been misinterpreted.
All right. Thank you for sharing, Kelly. Let's move along now to Chad. Chad, you can unmute yourself.
Yeah, I wanted to come back to actually the original question that Kelly had asked in terms of the southbound sight distance measurement. Why is it that the national formulation, I guess, supersedes the county protocol for sight distance?
So the
Yeah, and
county.
I can go ahead, Stacy.
I'll start and then jump in, John, if I miss anything. Yeah, the county calculation is very generic in its application. So it's 10 times the posted speed. It doesn't take into really any consideration of the terrain, the grade, the site specific features. And so that the community development code is very generic at the beginning. And so then when we're not able to meet that, then we use that national code that then does take into the more specific. So actually measuring the speed of the traffic, actually going out and measuring the grade of the road, putting that into the formula, including the perception reaction time of the driver, including the acceleration, deceleration characteristics of cars, and then assuming worst case conditions on the road being wet. And so that's why we use a more specific formula when the first formula can't be met. And so that national standard is the minimum that we would want to use for sight distance, and the measurements that we got exceed that by about 30%. So in our professional judgment, and using that same criteria throughout the county numerous times, we felt like it was appropriate to open the gate.
So my follow-up question then is that a standard procedure then? Because I can tell you how it kind of lands with many of us here in the neighborhood is that the county sight distance measurement didn't quite work out in the favor of removing the gate. Therefore, you go to the national to see if you can make it work, which in this case it did.
Right, in this case it did, but we also used a higher assumed speed. So we used the 38 miles per hour, which was higher than what the community development code would have required if it hadn't been measured. And so, yeah, I think to your point or to your question, yeah, we looked at, we were trying to determine if we felt like it was safe. And so we started at where we normally start, and then we used more specific formula to try and really get at the question, because the question was, can the gate be opened? And so we followed our standard procedures. We used that national formula many times throughout the county when there's questions to the applicability of the community development code formula.
Okay, and second question, and I feel like myself and a few others that live on Ridge Road have been exceptionally close to this process since the beginning, when the first flyers were mailed out in the end of 2019. I know I've had multiple communications with many of you that are on the line right now through county engineering and whatnot. One thing that I've always kind of requested but never received is there any sort of metrics or anything quantifiable that would show that the traffic is going to be dispersed from Blackhawk by doing this, or is it just in theory? And the reason I ask the question is because I think of myself and many of my neighbors. You know, if we're coming home and we're coming up 119th, we're probably going to turn in on Blackhawk to get home. If we're coming in on 113th, we're probably going to turn on Blackhawk to get home. The only time I see it being used is if we're coming from Thompson Road, Mill Pond, or the Forest Heights area, which, you know, it isn't typical. So I'm just wondering if there's been anything that's been looked at, you know, again, and metrics in place that would support that, hey, traffic is going to be dispersed from Blackhawk, or again, is it just in theory?
So Chad, I guess we don't have a specific metric that we looked at to determine how much traffic would use the Ridge Road access. However, just based on our experience, that it has to do a lot with proximity. So if you live near the intersection of Ridge Road and McDaniel, you're going to tend to use that because it's going to be faster than winding your way up Blackhawk Drive and through the neighborhood to get to where you want to go. So it really depends on where you're trying to go, where you live. And so I think we did make some estimates on how many vehicles we thought would be using, or how many homes would be using the new access. And so then we're going to, I guess, test that theory by collecting traffic data within 6 months to see what the volumes and speeds are.
Thank you for your questions, Chad. We're going to move now to Dorothy. Dorothy, you can unmute and ask your question.
Hi, I wanted to make a couple comments in regard to what was said. So in regard to things being safe, the Ridge Road gate as it is creates a bottleneck situation, and the bottleneck makes it harder for emergency response to get to areas, and that would actually include the people close to the gate. So if one of the kids playing was injured or something went wrong, the bottleneck would create a delayed response time for that child that would be less safe than if the gate was open. In terms of the comment about would people really enter the gate, when I've been walking, I've observed sometimes cars parking there because of the length of time it takes to weave through the bottleneck. So I've observed sometimes someone parking, blocking the fire gate, which is actually illegal, to like deliver a pizza or deliver a package. So the people that are driving the routes know it takes significantly longer to snake through the bottleneck than if that gate were open. So I don't know that you could exactly say how many people would or would not use it, but wanted to comment in that regard. Also wanted to comment in terms of safety for the kids. I'm actually a healthcare provider, and one of the biggest risk factors for kids and traffic is them not being aware of traffic, aware of the potential risks of the street, and being mindful of it. When our kids were younger, we actually had a temporary gate that we pulled across the back of our driveway. So when the kids were playing in our driveway and in our lawn, and they were small, there was a clear boundary there for them in terms of the bikes and the balls to keep them safer. And that's a very good thing to start to teach very young kids about traffic. It would be to the kids' benefit long-term to be aware of traffic conditions and the risks of the street. I treat people that are injured, being hit by cars, adults and children. It's often an issue, adults that don't attend, that are texting on their phone, distracted, that dart out, are ones that are tending to be at higher risk of being hit. There's often those factors that carry in. And sometimes if people are young and engaging in at-risk behaviors around traffic, as adults, they'll also engage in at-risk behaviors around traffic. So this is actually probably a good chance for people who live at Ridge Road to have a chance to keep their kids safe by teaching them, okay, a street is a place where you should be aware. There's a little more risk there. If they're walking in Portland or walking other places where this is not like a artificial blockade, they need to be aware of streets and traffic and cars, and it's going to keep them safer their whole lives if they're aware of that.
Thank you very much for sharing, Dorothy. Did you have a question you wanted a response to, or are you just commenting?
I wanted to comment that because I don't think anybody else had brought that up. I also wanted to make another comment I don't think I've heard brought up. People keep talking about the south sight line and wanting it to be safer. A comment that was brought up earlier that I haven't heard anybody address is there is a fence on that south line, and the fence isn't a code. The fence is almost directly up against the sidewalk. Washington County code is that that fence should be 3 foot inset from the sidewalk. So if you inset that fence to meet county code 3 feet, your sight line would get a lot bigger, and that would really improve safety quite a bit. I know this was brought up a couple times in the past during COVID. It's kind of harder to reach people. But I'm unclear why that hasn't been corrected, because the code is clear that a fence needs to be 3 feet off the sidewalk.
Yeah, I'm not as familiar with the planning codes as you seem to be, Dorothy, but we can look into that for sure. I know our code enforcement group has been really overtaxed in these last couple of years and understaffed, and so we'll write that down and we'll follow up with you on that, Dorothy.
Yeah, COVID's been really hard for people. I totally understand, especially being in healthcare, and I understand it's been stressful for many people. But if there were 3 more feet of distance, I think that'd make a huge difference for the sight line that these people are concerned about. And I think it's fair to be concerned about the sight line, and trimming back the trees and the bushes will definitely improve it beyond what it is now. But an extra 3 feet would make more difference.
All right, thank you very much for sharing, Dorothy. Let's move now to Tao. You may unmute yourself.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, okay. So I actually mainly also just have a comment and also a response to one of the previous community member. I do think that he raised a really good point that whether the traffic is really going to be diverged from Black Hawk. I actually happen to be walking my dog in that intersection between the Black Hawk and 112 all the time, and I have to say more than 50% of the traffic going through that intersection does end up going to the Ridgetop area, and it may be reasonable to assume that oftentimes when people return home, they're still going to use Black Hawk, but I think it will be very easy for people to decide to use the Ridgetop when they exit out going into McDaniel, just because making the left turn on the Black Hawk onto 100 onto McDaniel was actually not always that easy. So I do fully expect there would be much fairly significant traffic on Black Hawk. And also I just want to say, a lot of these discussion about safety with children, I think it's really just, I think we all move into a place, we get used to what was already there. We kind of tend to assume that that should be there forever. But I actually also have children. I live on Black Hawk. I don't think it's necessarily fair for my children to live on the side of the street where there are tons of traffic, and a lot of these cars are driving very fast. So if anything, I also actually want the county to do something about the speed on Black Hawk, especially right after McDaniel turns into Black Hawk. So yeah, I don't think really it's terribly helpful talking about safety of the children when we all know what we're talking about. We just really want to keep things as it is because we're used to it. But you know, other people have children as well. Okay, I'm done with my comments.
All right. Thank you very much for sharing. And we will go next to a participant here whose username is a phone number. I'm going to go ahead and allow you to talk, and you can unmute.
Is it *6 to unmute for a phone?
We can hear you now.
No, that was me,
Oh,
Chris.
that was you. I apologize.
I believe *6 is will unmute your phone.
Alrighty.
Or not.
We are going to come back to you in just a moment here and see if we've gotten that fixed. But for now, let's go to Boris. Boris, you can unmute yourself.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. So I have one simple question. One is there was this community feedback initiative, right? I think about a year ago or maybe two. Time is flying. And based on the results, it seems like the opinions were split. So what was the point of soliciting the feedback if it wasn't taken into account, essentially? It was just one half was considered and the other half was ignored, essentially. That's it.
Melissa, I think you're answering that question.
Yeah, I am.
Okay, thank you.
Are you referencing the question, the survey that we took?
Exactly, yes. On the,
Okay.
I think on the pink slip of paper, yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna check and see here.
Yeah,
if
it seems
we
like
can-
results were 50% pro and 50% against. The decision was made pro. So-
I don't believe that was quite the way that the split went. There were yes totals were 67. There were total of 132 responses from 94 unique addresses. 67, which reflected 57 individual addresses, were yes, and the no's were 60 that reflect 38 individual addresses. So 57 individual households supported it, 38 individual households opposed it.
So, but still, it's quite a significant against vote. So,
I understand, but
yeah,
the 57 was, 20 households more than the 38. I'm not going to be able to do the percentage in my head because I'm not a math person, but
yeah. So, if I may follow up a little bit. So, with the reduced police presence and the amount of burglaries and just theft that's going on, I think a lot of people express this concern that opening this gate will give an easy route for the thieves to just exit these neighborhoods. Has this been considered when you made this decision or not?
I'm fairly confident to say that the theft issue did not factor into our decision. I mean, I don't, opening the gate, I'm not quite sure why, I mean, to have that, I mean, it doesn't affect your access for a thief standpoint because they don't have to necessarily access the neighborhood via the gate. They can access the neighborhood via Blackhawk and park and hit a number of houses all at the same time. And then, go on foot back and forth to their vehicle. It's not a necessary, they don't necessarily need or rely or require access from McDaniel to be to porch pirate or other burglary
Yeah, usually
activity.
most of these people they use cars, and the easier the
Yes,
escape
that's
route,
correct.
the better for them.
Yeah, but that's right.
I understand
but
your point. Yeah, if they really set on a certain house, then they'll reach it. But a lot of them just scope in the whole subdivision, and this is just very unfortunate timing when the law enforcement is on a big downturn. It just seems like bad things kind of coming in strides, right? So
I encourage your neighborhood if you've got a concern, the sheriff's department does have neighborhood watch programs that they can assist you to create and develop. Not, I mean, that's really a question for law enforcement more than land use and transportation. The information we can follow up with you if you need us to connect you with someone from the sheriff's office for neighborhood watch. We can certainly do that.
thank you.
All right, thank you, Boris. I am going to give another opportunity to the participant who joined us via phone to try and unmute yourself. If you would like to give that another try, we'll give you a few seconds here. All right.
Chris, there is a Glenn Myers who's in the chat who's asked a question.
Oh my goodness. Thank you very much for bringing that to my attention, Melissa.
Short version, have you measured the site distance looking east on McDaniel at Blackhawk? I think it doesn't meet your guideline, and thus removing the gate helps by reducing traffic entering McDaniel from Blackhawk. It's Mr. Glenn Myers.
I can answer that, Melissa. We did measure site distance from Blackhawk looking east. The site distance measurement, you can see 350 feet. So it's kind of the same situation. It doesn't, if speeds are 38 coming that direction, it doesn't fully meet the community development code 10 times, but it also meets, it definitely meets the stopping site distance for Blackhawk. So it does meet our, critical safety site distance measurements from Blackhawk, but you're right. Looking from Blackhawk that direction, there are some things that restrict site distance as well.
Thank you, John, and thank you, Glenn, for your question. Let's move now to Gary. Gary, you can unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you for allowing me one other comment. I would like to back up Glenn Myers. Looking east, the Washington County Clean Water Services has taken over that biofiltration water quality facility, and the growth there is definitely not 350 feet because it's growing up. And if you go out onto McDaniel to go east, you have to really be efficient at your entry point. So not that is justification or not to remove the gate on Ridge, but I'd like to make a comment that in Iron Ridge, there are 60 homes. And what is Washington County's calculation that a home generates? How many trips a day does one home generate? Those 60 homes, how many trips a day does that generate down 112th and Blackhawk? Because that's a fair number of amount of traffic being flooded down through Ironwood. And I think majority of those 60 people, if they really think about it, they're going to get out to McDaniel the most efficient way they can, and that's to go through where the gate is right now. But how many trips a day does one household generate in Washington County's calculation? And that's 60 times 60.
It tends to be about 10 trips a day.
So that's 600 trips potentially that development would create to go through Ironwood, down McDaniel, down Blackhawk, and 112. To me, that seems really excessive.
Well, the other thing I heard you say, Gary, was that the vegetation and that Clean Water Services bioswale is causing a problem. So we'll open up a service request to take a look at that.
Yeah, thank you
for letting us know.
Yeah. But talking about safety, extra 600 trips down that strip of 112th and Blackhawk. That definitely creates a dangerous situation.
Thank you for sharing, Gary. And it looks like the person whose phone number appeared that I wasn't able to get their mic to work did post their question in the chat. So I'm going to read that now. He left a comment here. Our family has been living on Northwest 112th Place for 10 years, and they want to thank us for getting this done. They've witnessed for 10 years folks driving into Iron Ridge Estates, running the small stop sign intersection countless times, also endangering local kids. No one said this comment, but during snow events, as we live on a sloped part of the street, countless folks have lost control and abandoned their cars right in front of our house. The people living in Iron Ridge Estates will love that they can access their home this winter with no sloped road in the community itself, and thus not having to abandon their vehicles. Thank you for sharing that. And it looks like we no longer have any hands raised at this moment. Melissa.
Okay. Well, Gary, we got a question.
Oh,
Nope.
We do have a question right
do.
here. Here we go, Susan. Good timing. You can unmute yourself.
Hi, this is Jim and Susan Spitzer. We live at the far end of Ironwood, to the opposite end of the development that is of concern here. And we just want to weigh in with our fact that we should encourage people to have shorter routes. And it's clearly a shorter route for anybody going anywhere out of that end of the neighborhood and the Iron Ridge Estates to go out directly onto the main thoroughfare there than to have to go through the Ironwood development.
Thank you very much for your comment. And I believe that was it.
All right. Anybody else? Going one. Okay. Oh, we've got two more.
Excellent. Sonia, you can unmute yourself.
Hi there. I wanted to address the sidewalk and the concern about not having a sidewalk, because as a parent, I thoroughly agree with you. And there are times that my husband and I actually will walk down that portion. And it is of great concern. And I think that what you are proposing, and I encourage everybody who's listening to definitely pursue requesting from the county, requesting a sidewalk up there for numerous reasons, other than we shouldn't be waiting for developers to pay for it. And I want to go back to a prime example when Bonnie Slope Elementary was put in, and we had begged the county, and our words were specifically, please don't wait till somebody dies before you put in a sidewalk. And that's exactly what happened, is that we did lose a 19-year-old who was hit on 119th, and then they put in the sidewalk. So I encourage everybody that's listening to please pursue that link that was shared, to definitely start working on having the county putting in, instead of waiting for the developers, put in a sidewalk for the sake of us all, not just the children.
Thank you for sharing that, Sonia.
Thank you.
And it looks like Chad has another question here. Chad, you can unmute yourself.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment because it's come up a number of times during this discussion regarding quote unquote kids playing in the street as the primary reason why us in the neighborhood wanted to retain the fire gate. And I can tell you again, I don't know if there's anybody on the line that's had more correspondence with the county regarding this for the last 3 years. And I can assure you, I can't speak for everybody that's provided feedback, but I can assure you in terms of myself and my immediate neighbors, kids playing in the street has never been a primary driver, if you will, or primary reason as to the fire gate being retained. It's always been about whether or not cars can safely enter and exit through the intersection if the fire gate were to be removed. Now, pedestrian traffic, bicyclists, dog walkers, all of that stuff, yeah, those are, kind of ancillary concerns. There's no doubt about it. But I just want to make it known that, the kids playing and all of that stuff has never been the number one reason. It's always been about whether or not that intersection can be safe for traffic. And, having lived on Ridge Road for 5 years, I can tell you there's rarely a week that goes by where there's not a car that has to lock up its brakes or a horn honking or something along that lines, with the traffic as it is right now. So, that's our primary concern right there. And I just want to make sure everybody's comfortable with that.
As the person who answered most of the email correspondence that came in, I will support Chad's statement that he is correct. The kids playing in the street was not a primary component. It was mentioned multiple times, but I agree with you, Chad, that was never your primary concern.
Thank you. I appreciate that comment.
No problem.
Thank you very much, Chad. It doesn't appear that anybody else has their hand raised at this moment. If you'd like to ask a question here, please raise your hand in the next few seconds.
Few seconds.
Few seconds. Here we go.
Susan's
Susan.
back.
You can unmute yourself, Susan.
Thank you. This is Susan Spitzer, the other part of the Spitzer group. One of the things we noticed on Talon Terrace, which again is the opposite end of the neighborhood, is we are aware of how much through traffic we already have. And on Talon Terrace in particular, how people speed up at either end of Talon. And regardless of the outcome of this discussion, we are going to be really pitching for speed bumps. There's a new development proposed off of West that will add to the through flow of traffic from another neighborhood into Ironwood. And anything that allows people a shortcut, encourage people to speed.
Thank you very much, Susan.
Okay. Well, we appreciate everyone's participation tonight. We're glad we had the opportunity to hear from so many of you who were able to share your concerns and your questions with us. We will be continuing to send emails to those of you who have registered so that we can give you updates on when the gate will actually be removed. So please watch your email for that information. We encourage you, again, we will send out results of and our when we're going to be doing traffic studies and things like that through our Neighborhood Streets program. And please do continue to submit through the Biking and Pedestrian program your concerns for a sidewalk. Anybody else have anything you'd like to tell the group? Stacy, John?
I don't have anything to add this time. Thank you, Melissa. And thanks everybody for attending and articulating your points so well.
And I don't have anything else as well. So thank you all. Thanks, Melissa.
Okay. Well, thank you all for attending. We appreciate it. And please continue to stay in touch.